Tessa Winfield had always considered the old logging roads through her beloved forest a disfigurement. Steering her hybrid SUV along the gravel path, she felt the jostle of every pothole in her bones. She was an environmentalist one who believed deeply in the power and importance of preserving nature's integrity. The majesty of towering pines and black spruces never ceased to fill her with awe, but neither did they ever let her forget the fragility of this place. In her mind, every fallen tree told a story of a patient life ended too soon. Her destination was uncharted territory for her, a small tract of recently acquired woodland, rumored to be torn down to make way for a new logging cabin enterprise. As she pulled up near the end of the rutted lane, Tessa saw a broad sign reading, Oak Ridge Craft and Carpentry, new log cabins coming soon. Disapproval flickered across her face. Yet she parked and stepped onto the soft forest floor, inhaling the mild scent of pine needles and loam. She was determined to find a way to protect this patch of sky and trees before it was replaced with modern amenities and wooden beams. She wandered toward a half-completed cabin set back among the birch trunks. At first glance, it appeared charming. The logs were expertly fitted, each corner precisely joined. Aromas of fresh timber drifted around her, conjuring images of sturdy homes. She admired the craftsmanship in spite of herself. But as a conservation advocate, she couldn't help the pang of guilt pricking her heart. If someone was willing to accommodate conversation, perhaps there was a solution that allowed for both the natural environment and modest development. She had come to try. Near the cabin, a tall man with wide shoulders was examining timber stacks. He wore sturdy boots and a well-worn flannel shirt, its sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms streaked with sawdust. Tessa paused. This must be Henry Larson, the craftsperson she'd heard about. Local rumor said if you wanted a custom log cabin built with an old-world technique, you went to him. He was rumored to use minimal machinery, preferring to shape the logs by hand, which earned him respect among certain environmental circles, yet disdain from others for building structures in places some believed should remain untouched. Henry sensed her presence and glanced up. His eyes were the same warm gold as morning sunlight, contrasting with a face creased by the lines of hard labor and perhaps a touch of concern. Tessa gave a polite, if hesitant wave. He gave a nod back. "Afternoon," she said gently, stepping over a stray log. "Are you Henry Larson?" "That's me," he replied, his voice steady. "Can I help you?" Tessa tried not to dwell on the swirl of anxiety under her calm exterior. "My name's Tessa Winfield. I've come to learn more about your plans here. I'm an environmental advocate, and—" Henry gave a half smile, half sigh. "I might have known. I've seen letters posted in town urging folks to oppose new cabin projects." She flushed, a bit uneasy. "Yes, some of us have been campaigning to curb unnecessary development. But I'm not here to pick a fight. I want to understand what you're doing with these cabins and maybe find common ground." Henry studied her for a moment. He set down his mallet before gesturing politely for her to join him. Tessa approached, stepping carefully around a pile of debarked logs. He motioned to a makeshift bench, a plank resting across two stumps. She took a seat. A black-capped chickadee serenaded them from a nearby branch as Henry sat beside her, hands resting on his knees. "I do my best to use down timber," Henry explained, "and for what I need to cut, I choose selectively. I don't kill old growth unless it's unavoidable. But I see you're worried about the bigger picture, the forest." She nodded, deciding it was best to speak plainly. "We're losing important habitats for wildlife, and once we open these roads, we invite more traffic, more noise, and eventually more development." Henry's gaze lingered on a newly carved crossbeam. "I appreciate what you're saying, yet there's also the reality of people needing places to live. And for me, building log cabins is a way of life. It's what I know. It's how I feed my family and keep a roof over my head." Tessa found herself curious about him despite her wariness. She wondered if he was married, if children waited for him at home. But the question vanished from her mind just as quickly as it came. "I'm not asking you to stop entirely. Perhaps there's a balance, a way to ensure minimal environmental impact, maybe a reforestation plan or a reduced number of cabins. Henry's brows drew together thoughtfully. Reforestation is a possibility, and I'd be willing to limit the development if it preserves the spirit of this land. He shifted his stance. Look, I'm not a big company. It's mainly me, a couple of apprentices, and a dedication to old techniques. I want to keep the forest healthy, but I also need to earn a living. The conversation hung there for a moment, neither party utterly convinced, but neither wanting to dismiss the other. Tessa felt a pull, an unspoken sense that Henry wasn't like the bureaucrats she'd tangled with. She sensed a grounded decency in him. For a moment, silence settled in, broken only by the wind brushing through pine needles overhead. As dusk approached, Tessa prepared to leave. Henry walked her back to her SUV, his footsteps deliberate on the fur-needled earth. Before she opened the car door, she looked over her shoulder at the half-finished cabin. I'll come back tomorrow if that's all right. I want to see more, see how you work, she said, surprising herself. He gave a faint smile, as if amused. Sure, he replied. Come by early if you want to watch the process. Sometimes we start before dawn. It's the best time to hear the forest. That night, Tessa slept restlessly, dreaming of pine-scented breezes and logs crying out in protest as they were cut from the forest floor. She awoke with a sense of purpose. She was skeptical, but there was something about Henry's approach that nudged at her, urging her to keep an open mind. The next day, she arrived just before sunrise. Pale light shimmered through drifting morning haze. Henry was already there, rolling a log across the ground, sawdust still clinging to his gloves. An apprentice, a young man named Tyler, was crouched nearby, carefully measuring lengths of timber. Tessa noticed a thermos perched on a rock and inhaled the comforting aroma of coffee. Henry greeted her with a nod. In the crisp air, Tessa felt her breath catch as, for just a moment, the sun broke over the horizon. A gilded warmth painted the treetops. She had witnessed sunrises in countless wild places, but this one, filtered through half-constructed cabin walls, struck her in an unexpected way. It was as though the forest and Henry's craft momentarily existed in harmony. He offered her a mug from his thermos. It's strong, he warned, but it'll keep you warm. Thanks, she said, wrapping her hands around the mug. Her eyes flicked to the cabin's logs. You shape everything by hand, I see. Machines can do it faster, but there's a certain soul to doing this work yourself, Henry said softly. It's like respecting the tree that gave its life for this construction. For a time she watched in quiet awe as logs were measured, cut, and notched according to traditional cabin building techniques. Henry's gestures were careful, yet confident. She saw how his eyes lingered on every grain pattern, looking for knots or flaws. It struck her that perhaps he cared about these trees more than she'd assumed. The forest was not merely a commodity to him, it was part of his livelihood in a deeper, more spiritual sense. Around midday, when the sunlight was strong and the chirps of chickadees echoed brightly, Tessa ventured to ask Henry a question that had been stirring. Why out here? Why this patch of forest? Henry measured a log before turning his full attention to her. This land was cheap because it's hard to access. Not many roads, hard for big equipment to come through. I specialize in working with minimal footprint. I have a 2-year lease of sorts from the landowner. They want me to build 3 cabins, maybe 4, as a retreat for those who want to get away from city life. Maybe it's not ideal for you, but it's better than a logging company clearing it all for lumber. She leaned against a sapling. True, but do they really need 4 cabins? Could they be satisfied with fewer? He shrugged. Might be negotiable, but it's never that simple. People want money in return for their investment. I'm stuck in the middle, trying to honor the trees, yet still pay my bills. Tessa realized she was stepping into a complicated dance, one that required negotiation and empathy. She had spent her career painting developers as villains, yet Henry did not fit that mold. Being here, seeing his hands coax timber into shape, made her reconsider the usual lines she drew between protector and exploiter of nature. Something in his gaze, in the weight behind his words, told her he was sincere. A light breeze carried the gentle rustle of leaves as Tessa packed up her notes. She had a plan: gather data, measure the forest's capacity, investigate how many trees would be sacrificed per cabin. But instead of confrontation, she found herself wanting to work with Henry. For the first time, this visage of unity between human handiwork and wild forest flickered in her mind like a faint star on a cloudy night, persuasive and alluring. Late that afternoon, a storm gathered. Dark clouds rolled in, threatening rain. Henry prepared tarps to cover the partially completed cabin. Tessa helped him tie them down, fumbling with the ropes while the wind whipped her hair into her eyes. Thunder grumbled overhead. They rushed about, an unspoken camaraderie taking over. Just as the downpour hit, they dove beneath the protective awning of the cabin's porch. Sheets of rain drenched the world beyond, chiseling the pine needles into glistening fragments. Both breathing heavily from their scramble, they found themselves standing shoulder to shoulder, listening to the drumming rain. It was an intimacy formed in shared discomfort, two hearts beating fast under a wild storm. Tessa's gaze flickered to Henry. Water droplets clung to the ends of his hair. She noticed the firmness of his jaw, the earthy scent of sweat and sawdust. A flush warmed her cheeks, and she hoped the dim light would keep her environment concealed. She reminded herself this was a mission for the environment, but her heart insisted on complicating things. Clearing her throat, she nodded toward the black sky. "We might be here for a while." Henry gave a low chuckle. "Could be. Summer storms up here can be fickle." He exhaled softly. "I'm grateful you helped. These tarps are old and I had to patch them. They could have blown away if I had tried it alone." She took a slow breath. "Happy to help. It's my forest too, in a way. Protecting it, even from a storm, seems the right thing to do." A flicker of lightning lit the sky, followed by a distant rumble. Henry turned his focus toward her. "I know this might sound strange, but I'm grateful for your visit. I know we're on opposite sides, or maybe we were. But you've reminded me not to lose sight of how delicate this land is." A sudden surge of feeling rippled through Tessa's chest. "We don't have to stay on opposite sides," she said, her voice quiet. "Maybe it's a conversation, a dialogue." He nodded, as if letting her words wash over him. "Yeah, I'd like that." When the storm finally eased, twilight was already wrapping itself around the forest. The trees stood black against a pale pink sky. Tessa realized her phone had died, and driving the muddy road in the dark wouldn't be pleasant. Henry offered her a spare flashlight. "Let me walk you to your vehicle," he said. They trudged through wet leaves. Branches dripped, and the distant calls of frogs and crickets surged around them. At her SUV, Tessa paused, hesitation making her linger. "What if we had a deeper talk?" she asked. "Maybe after you're done working one evening?" Henry's eyes searched hers. "I'd like that, maybe tomorrow night. Forecast says we'll have clear skies, perfect for stargazing. This forest is pretty spectacular under a bright moon." Her heart gave a subtle flutter. "All right, tomorrow." She drove away in the settling dark, heart aflutter, mind spinning. Was it possible for her to blend activism with the slow, deliberate artistry of log cabin building? She was used to focusing on threats to the land, but Henry offered a path that wasn't black and white. Her conviction remained, yet now it coexisted with a new warmth, a swirl of possibility for how people and planet might coexist with respect and compassion. The next afternoon, Tessa returned to the site. The day passed in quiet observation. She measured stumps and counted seedlings. Meanwhile, Henry and his apprentice worked with methodical precision, shaping logs, hoisting them into place, adjusting every angle so the structure fit like a puzzle. Occasionally, Tessa asked questions. Henry answered patiently, explaining the geometry and the old Nordic building styles he used. By sundown, the cabin looked more complete, though still not finished. They took dinner by a small campfire near the edge of the forest. Henry unwrapped sandwiches, and Tessa sliced apples she had brought. Over the meal, they slipped into a comfortable companionship, like old friends who had shared many firesides instead of just one. When the final rays of sun sank behind towering pine spires, Henry rose and pointed to a clearing. Ready to see the stars? She followed him down a narrow path. They emerged onto a rocky outcrop, an opening in the canopy that revealed a vast swath of sky. The dusk was deep, but the first stars flickered faintly overhead. Soon enough, the night would put on its grand show. They settled onto a fallen log, side by side. Subdued twilight painted Henry's features in gentle gray. The hush of the forest stretched around them, broken only by the soft chirping of crickets and the occasional call of a nearby owl. Tessa felt her heart steady, drawn in by the forest's lullaby. Then, as though on cue, the heavens ignited with points of silver light. Henry exhaled. Every time I see this, I realize how small we are. This forest, these cabins, even our debates. It's a tiny piece of something vast. Tessa found herself leaning ever so slightly toward him. It's humbling, she agreed, and it's part of why I fight so hard to protect places like this. We may be small, but we can make a mess if we're not careful. Henry turned his gaze back to her. Tessa, I understand your cause. I love this forest too. When I build, I work with the logs carefully, trying to honor each piece. But I also realize that people want a taste of this beauty. They want to escape the city. Log cabins can let them experience nature without destroying it. If we're thoughtful, she considered his words. You might be right. People who stay in these cabins might form a connection with the land. And once they form that bond, they usually want to protect it. Maybe it's better than shutting people out entirely. He gently placed his hand on the log between them. Sometimes necessity doesn't have to completely oppose nature, he murmured. If we approach it with respect, maybe it's just another path that leads people back to caring. A hush fell between them, charged with possibility. Tessa felt her pulse flutter at the tenderness in his voice. She thought of all she'd seen from Henry, his unwavering care for details, his willingness to accommodate her concerns. She'd arrived prepared for a rugged fight between preservation and profit. Yet here she was, sitting under the stars with a man who was more ally than adversary. Moonlight slowly rose, casting a faint silver glow on the clearing. Tessa dared a glance at Henry's profile. Before she quite knew what she was doing, she set her hand on top of his. His fingers were calloused from years of woodwork, but his touch felt safe, kind. He looked at her, quiet but steady, and a small smile stretched across his face. How about a compromise? Henry asked softly, as though both of them were at a threshold. I'll limit the cabins to 2. I'll restore more areas than I disturb, planting seedlings for each tree we cut. Her heart swelled with relief and gratitude. It sounds like a wonderful step. And I'll organize a local volunteer group to maintain those saplings, make sure they thrive. Deal, he whispered. From that moment on, the night around them seemed alive with hope. They sat, hands gently intertwined, as the sky unveiled its midnight tapestry. Tessa felt a calm joy rush through her veins, a realization that perhaps they had found a true meeting point between heart and land. The world was not perfect, but it was better when people worked together, forging a path that balanced the needs of everyone, trees and humans alike. Her conscience felt lighter, yet her emotions were deepening. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Henry didn't move away. Instead, he gave a contented sigh, as though he'd been waiting for a chance to share this kind of peace with someone who understood. In the ensuing weeks, Tessa and Henry shaped their compromise into reality. She introduced him to some local conservationists who helped map out carefully selected logging sites to minimize habitat disruption. Henry reminded them that each log bore a story, and that any cabin worth building should reflect the spirit of the land from which it arose. Despite occasional disagreements, Both sides pursued solutions with an open heart. They walked the forest together, marking trees that were dying or damaged, setting aside healthy groves to remain untouched. On one of these walks, Henry introduced Tessa to a centuries-old oak. Its gnarled trunk soared high overhead, limbs twisting in silent testament to the trials of time. Tessa rested her palm gently against the bark, feeling the pulse of the living wood under her fingertips. Henry regarded her with a quiet pride. "This one's going nowhere," he said. "It's the soul of this place." They also found time for moments of tender closeness amid all the work. Some nights, Tessa stayed past sundown, sharing a simple meal by the cabin as the forest's nocturnal symphony rose around them. Others, Henry visited her modest camp a few miles away, where she performed her daily checks for pollution or invasive species. Their conversations grew intimate, stories about childhood memories, dreams for the future, each more personal than the last. Late one evening, after another full day of measuring and building, Tessa and Henry stood under a canopy of shimmering stars, much like the first stargazing night. The new cabins were well underway, but each was designed in harmony with the trees, nestled into clearings rather than bulldozed expanses. Reforestation markers dotted the perimeter where Tessa's group would soon plant saplings. The forest seemed to welcome the joint effort, as if it recognized this union of practicality and respect. They stood side by side, gazing at the half-finished roof beams. "You'll have paying guests soon," Tessa teased. "Are you ready to play host?" Henry grinned. "I might still prefer my old farmstead at the far side of the valley, but I'll make each cabin feel like a home for anyone who stays." She turned toward him. The moonlight outlined the strength in his shoulders, which she had grown to trust. "I think they'll find more than just a cabin here. They might discover the kind of reverence we feel for this place." His eyes settled on hers, gentle and deeply sincere. "I'm glad I met you, Tessa. You reminded me what it really means to be part of this forest, not just use it." She felt her heart soar. "I'm glad I met you too. You've shown me that compromise doesn't have to mean sacrifice. It can mean finding a way to let the forest flourish alongside humanity if we're careful." Henry's hand slipped around her waist. There, beneath a dome of constellation-laden sky, she reached up and brushed her fingers across his cheek. Without speaking, they drew closer, sharing a tender kiss that felt like the ringing of crystal chimes. In that quiet moment, nature and necessity merged seamlessly in their hearts. The stars, trees, and distant hum of life around them bore witness to a promise that, even in a world of constant change, love and respect could create a new beginning. They lingered in each other's arms. Fresh pine scents mingled with the warm aura of wood smoke drifting from the small fire. Tessa thought of all the obstacles that threatened wilderness: corporations eager to gut the land, policies that masqueraded as progress but left destruction in their wake. But here, in Henry's embrace, she felt hope. She imagined the future travelers who would rent these quaint cabins, stepping out onto porches to breathe in the crisp forest air, forging connections with the wilderness rather than ignoring it. Over time, Tessa saw to it that her environmental group worked collaboratively with Henry's endeavors. They conducted workshops, inviting city residents to come learn about responsible forestry, replant trees, and leave footprints of empathy upon the soil. People from all walks of life arrived, drawn by a desire to experience something authentic. Henry taught visitors how to shape a beam with hand tools, or how to maintain a cabin's foundation without draining the land's vitality. Tessa, meanwhile, guided them through the surrounding woods, pointing out the fragile webs of life that thrived under rotting logs and among ferns. And in all these efforts, Tessa and Henry stood together like two sturdy timbers in the same structure, each supporting the other. They learned that their synergy, her drive to preserve and his gift for creation, could raise something lasting and beautiful, like a cabin nestled among ancient conifers, warmed by the memory of starlit evenings. In the hush of the forest's embrace, they found the home neither had anticipated when they first crossed paths. The forest, too, seemed to bless them, with its gentle songs and 1,000 patches of sky gleaming through leafy canopies. Their debates no longer took the shape of confrontation. Instead, they became the playful banter of two lovers who had bridged the gap between activism and craft. They discovered that beneath the watchful sky, two strong willed souls could learn to share one truth: that nature and humanity thrived best when they remembered they belonged to the same precious world. One final night, before the logs were all set in place, Henry invited Tessa back to the clearing. He had just finished sanding a new beam, and the tang of fresh wood shavings hovered in the air. Guiding her gently by the hand, he pulled her into the starlight. The canopy of branches parted above them, and the sky yawned wide, an endless field of sparkling possibilities. Standing close, he pressed a small wooden charm into her hand, carved in the shape of a pine cone. "It's just something I made," he murmured, looking almost shy, "a reminder of the forest and of me." Tessa gazed at the delicate piece. The smooth grains merged into a symbol of life, growth, and renewal. She closed her fingers around it, feeling tears prick her eyes. Around them, the forest exuded the calm acceptance of dusk. Crickets chirped softly, and an owl hooted a distant lullaby. The night seemed to hum with a serene gratitude, as if praising the union forged between the two who had once been at odds. She raised her eyes to meet his. "Thank you," she whispered, "for sharing your craft, for trusting me with this, and for believing we could do more good together than apart." With that, he drew her into an embrace. Their breath mingled in the cool night air, hearts pounding in harmony. Above them, the brilliance of countless stars shimmered, a silent testament to how small and yet how powerful each person could be when guided by both passion and empathy. From that moment on, neither of them doubted what they had found. The cabins went up, but so did the seedlings, and slowly they detected fresh connections forming in the community. Conservation and craft intertwined beneath the patch of sky that had first brought them together. In the end, Tessa and Henry created something lasting, more than just timber structures or reforestation maps. They shaped a promise, built upon the same steady foundation they had discovered under the starlight. Each day, as dusk approached, they would stand at the edge of the forest, watching the cabin walls glow gold in the setting sun, and every night they would look up together, hand in hand, letting the vastness of the universe remind them that a love as enduring as the wild places they cherished could illuminate even the darkest corners of the world.